This animated visualization tracks a staggering timeline. On the left, the World War II Siege of Leningrad, ending at 872 days. On the right, a live counter for a modern battle that has now eclipsed it, surging past 1,500 days. This massive effort is concentrated on Malattom Machka, a settlement with a pre-war population of just 3,000 people. Moscow needs this specific piece of terrain as a staging ground. Capturing it is the prerequisite step for any future assault on the main Ukrainian stronghold in the region, Orif. The town operates as the primary anchor for the Ukrainian defense line, while simultaneously serving as the critical logistical hub supplying the entire southern front. This makes Malattom Machka the geographic linchpin of the region. Its survival directly dictates the stability of the entire southern theater. If you zoom into the ground level after 4 straight years of combat operations, the scale of the destruction becomes clear. Look at this source image of the settlement. A multi-story apartment building has been reduced to a skeletal shell, the concrete sheared off to expose the floors inside. Defensive infrastructure and civilian homes alike have been completely pulverized. The attackers face an unsolvable tactical geometry. The local topography has fused with modern drone surveillance to create a perfect, inescapable trap. This specific environment actively neutralizes the mechanics of a traditional advance. Both armored columns and infantry squads face immediate destruction the moment they step off the line of departure. Massive artillery advantages mean nothing here. You cannot exploit a bombardment if you do not have a survivable pathway to move your forces into the target area. This 3D map reveals the absolute elevation disparity. The village sits isolated in the blue lowlands, completely surrounded by Russian positions on the red high ground. From here, attackers possess absolute fire control, guiding constant artillery down into the settlement. Years of this plunging fire have erased the trench networks, flattened the concrete bunkers, and collapsed the reinforced basements. Russian commanders viewed the ruined settlement as indefensible. They expected the shattered trenches and collapsed basements to provide no resistance against a coordinated push. Acting on that assumption, they deployed heavy mechanized columns, pushing armor forward to rapidly collapse the remaining Ukrainian defenses. But the same topography that gave them the high ground also created a fatal physical constraint. The lowlands funnel all heavy movement onto a single viable approach road. This is the topographical paradox. The high ground gave the attackers a false sense of dominance, blinding them to the reality that their armor had only one bottlenecked path into the valley. That single road dictates the entire flow of the battle. Every assault column is forced to drive down the exact same narrow corridor. Leaving the paved surface is not an option. The surrounding terrain consists of wide, exposed open fields that immediately strip away any speed or momentum from heavy vehicles. This tactical map details the hazard. Notice the dense layers of minefields flanking the approach vector. The lead vehicles strike a mine, the column halts, and the entire formation is trapped in place. You can see the physical outcome of this bottleneck in this aerial source image. Destroyed, charred tank hulls sit stranded and rusting on a single dirt path, unable to advance or retreat. Despite these localized armor graveyards, command ordered the same mechanized assaults repeatedly down the identical vector, multiplying their losses without shifting the front line. Massing armor is the cornerstone of a military breakthrough. But when the terrain forces that armor into a single pre-sighted corridor, those expensive vehicles become fatal liabilities. The failure at the front line is compounded by a collapse in the rear echelon. To understand why the assault stalls so quickly, we have to look at the macro logistics. This map shows the operational radius of Ukrainian deep strike drone units. They maintain an active interdiction zone extending up to 90 kilometers behind the Russian front line. By hunting supply trucks and fuel convoys at this depth, the drones effectively sever the logistical arteries. Assault units are starved of the fuel and ammunition they need before they even reach the staging areas. This overwatch is managed continuously. In this source image, a soldier actively pilots a multi-rotor drone, maintaining an uninterrupted eye in the sky. This constant aerial surveillance ensures that nothing moves unnoticed. Commanders cannot stealthily mask the necessary equipment or personnel to coordinate a decisive push. A superior logistical network on paper is entirely neutralized when the opposing force maintains deep, persistent surveillance and the ability to strike those supply lines at will. With armored columns destroyed and supply lines fractured, Russian tactics pivoted. They abandoned heavy mechanized pushes in favor of small-scale infantry infiltrations. Standard doctrine dictates that these infantry units use the dense forest lines typical of the region to mask their approach and slip into the village unseen. But this source image shows why that doctrine fails here. Artillery has sheared the tree lines down to shattered stumps, erasing the visual cover entirely. The loss of the tree canopy leaves infiltrating infantry completely exposed from above. A squad stepping into a ruined forest line is immediately picked up by reconnaissance drones. Moving across this desolate, cratered ground means navigating vast stretches of open exposure where there is simply nowhere to hide from incoming fire. Even when a handful of soldiers successfully navigate the gauntlet and enter the village outskirts, the ruined structures offer no protection against swift counterattacks. They cannot hold the ground. Without environmental concealment, the sheer volume of infantry a commander can deploy is irrelevant. Unopposed overhead surveillance renders human wave tactics physically unsurvivable. The attritional loop of this battle is perfectly captured by a single location, a fortified penal colony complex on the southern edge of the settlement. To break the Ukrainian defenders inside, Russian forces subjected the prison to repetitive airstrikes, eventually pounding the concrete structures into rubble. But the geography dictates the flow of reinforcements. Ukrainian defenders can safely cycle troops into the ruins through the village's covered interior lines, while Russian units are forced to sprint across lethal open fields to reach it. This created a punishing tactical paradox. By using airstrikes to obliterate the prison, the attackers destroyed the exact structural cover they required to survive once they actually took the position. Total structural destruction did not pave the way for an advance. It maximized the attacker's exposure while amplifying the logistical advantages of the defending garrison. Zooming out after 1,500 days of continuous daily assaults reveals the true scale of the failure. The attacking forces have secured only a few peripheral structures on the eastern edge, creating a highly volatile 1.5-kilometer deep gray zone where nothing can survive. Look at this source image showing a cluster of rusted, destroyed armored vehicles. It is a direct visual ledger of the catastrophic material and human cost paid for a few meters of dirt. The broader strategic impact is severe. By bleeding their offensive capabilities out into these open fields, the attackers have effectively neutralized their own ability to threaten the primary stronghold of Orif. The tactical reality on the ground is so stark that local command structures are now continuously generating fabricated progress reports just to obscure the sustained failure from their superiors. At Malattom Machka, the combination of elevation and persistent aerial surveillance has rendered traditional assault tactics ineffective. To track the shifting realities of these front lines for yourself, click the link below to explore our interactive news map.